Good morning, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this week's Weekly Energy Boost. My name is Elisheva, and I'm here today with David, and we are talking about spiritually navigating cancel culture and how what's going on in the media, in society, and today can help us do our own spiritual work, as well as how do we spiritually navigate when those I would call it obstacles or challenges come up in our own lives or the lives of people around us. Weekly Energy Boost is a 7-day spiritual weather forecast where David and I and our guests provide our listeners with the most powerful and practical tools to navigate the coming 7 days. We do that through using the wisdom and tools of Kabbalah to tell stories, to provide anecdotes and examples that'll help clearly illustrate how you can take advantage of the opportunities and the potential pitfalls of the coming week. And this week is no different. I think there's a lot of opportunities this week to negate or deny the existence of certain personalities, certain energies. I think a lot of the time when we find ourselves in the cycle or in a pattern with certain negative personalities and individuals, it's a lot easier to ignore them or defame them, take them apart rather than deal with what's coming up for us. Whether that happens on a global scale or a personal scale, it doesn't really matter. The essence is the same. And when a number of years ago, I taught a class about a similar idea that exists in the ancient writings of the Kabbalists where, and I'll just leave this as the sort of platform for us to start the conversation. Rav Ashlag, in, I forget which book it is, but maybe you'll remember, talks about the idea that everything has a right to exist. That anything that we experience as negative or bad or poorly timed or executed is simply a fruit that hasn't ripened yet. And even the things that we perceive as evil or negative are simply in an evolutionary process that hasn't yet come to complete manifestation. So our tendency, especially, and maybe on a global scale that's a little bit harder to digest, when we look at that concept in our own personal lives, what that means is that anybody who we feel is doing damage or doesn't belong or doesn't have a right to criticize or complain or even be in your movie for that matter, what you're simply saying is that the universe doesn't know what it's doing. There's been a mistake here. The creator has overlooked my path or my journey, or there's a glitch in the system. And right now, the glitch is making my life living hell. We need to understand that in our own personal perspective, whatever it is may simply just not have reached its full development. And we are calling one of its stages of development painful or evil or improperly placed. So part of what Kabbalah asks us to do when we find something that's difficult or doesn't belong in our perspective of how life should be, to acknowledge that we're limited by our 5 senses. We experience a serious degree of illusion as long as we're in the physical reality, and to check ourselves to make sure that the reason we're experiencing what we're experiencing is or let's say to check to make sure that we have nothing to do with what's happening. And inevitably, there's always something that we can grow or learn from in that challenging circumstance.
You talked about cancel culture, and it's an interesting topic because we all have different ways that we generate negative energy, and as a result, those negative forces that we create hinder our growth, happiness, and our success. So it comes down to really a game of numbers. When I'm talking to people, I'm like, let's be very practical. Kabbalah is very practical. It's actually very scientific. Somebody who recently came to one of my seminars in Brazil, and he's like, I didn't want to come here. I was kind of forced to come. I'm like, what is all this like spiritual mumbo jumbo? And he's like, that was probably the most practical, almost scientific way of looking at life. Because I think that's what Kabbalah does. It does a good job of just breaking it down into its energetic components. The number one cause of negativity in our lives are caused by the words that we're just throwing out there. And they really fall into two buckets. Either these are words that are called evil speech, so they're words that generate negative forces and entities, or they're words that are of the positive speech, meaning they're words that somehow advance creation forward through the elevation of consciousness and helping people get closer to the light of the Creator.
And there's nothing in between.
There's nothing in between. And
I think is a shocker for a lot of people.
Yeah, so like there's about 10 different buckets of evil speech. Some say more, some say less. Depends on how you divide them. But there is actually a bucket that is basically, Rav Ashlag talks about this. The book you were referring to is On World Peace. The book I'm about to quote now is from Wisdom of Truth, literally the first chapter. Rav Ashlag says one bucket of evil speech is saying the unnecessary. So anytime you say something where the person hearing this is either thinking or will say,
why the heck are you telling me this?
Why? So what? It's like, so what?
Yeah.
Why'd you just say that? That's the form of evil speech because you're wasting words. You're wasting breath. The breath is connected to the soul. So you're actually wasting energy from your soul. It actually takes time away from life. And a person dies before their day simply because of the wasted words that they said. So that's a whole bucket all by itself. To really ask yourself, is what I'm saying useful in any way to help people get closer to the light of the Creator? Even if it's to make them laugh, as long as it's not at someone's expense, that brings joy and happiness. Like, even that's better than a so what? Why did you tell me that? I share this because a lot of people use words to negate, cancel, lower, or diminish somebody else.
They use words as a weapon.
They use words
you
as a
upset me, I'm going to hurt you. You shamed me, I'm going to hurt you. Disrespected me, I'm going to hurt you.
And a person has every right to do that. Every person has every, maybe they're treating you that way, so why not treat them that way? We're not getting into what's right or wrong. Really what it comes down to is there is negative forces being created. Even if you're right to do so, there's a price to pay. And you have a choice to live in one of two worlds. It's the world of judgment or mercy. The world of judgment is every single negative thing I do, I'll be held accountable. So for example, if they said to you, hey, look, you can judge everybody and even have an opinion about them and post about them and comment about them and say even in behind closed doors about people, no problem. But in return, we will make sure that there's a policeman following you around everywhere you go, watching everything you do, and pointing and ticketing you or arresting you for anything that is breaking the law.
Giving you demerits.
Yeah. And every year, we're going to have the IRS audit every single expense, every single penny you spent, and go through all your files. Do you feel comfortable with that? Nobody would feel comfortable. Everyone would say, I'd rather not have any of that happen to me, and in return, I won't speak about anybody else. But you need to know the minute you speak about other people or you judge people and you act on that judgment, you enter the world of judgment. So all these forces look into your files and hold you to the same standard and accountability. Now, some may say, well, that's a good thing, right? Let's all just be highly accountable and live in the world of judgment. I agree that if we all just decided to live in the world of judgment, the pain and suffering we would all experience would just move us forward. But I think the reason why people are listening to this podcast and why we all aim to be more spiritual is because we don't want to learn lessons the hard way. We're not just looking to be thrust through the meat grinder and then come out of it and say, well, that was a huge lesson and I'm really happy I learned it. We can learn in the Kabbalists say in this world of miracles, the world of mercy is called achishena, meaning I am involved in mercifully moving myself forward.
That's what we call proactive behavior.
That's proactive behavior.
I see what I need to work on and I choose to work on it before it becomes inflamed and exacerbated.
The world of judgment is called beito, in its time. Everything will happen eventually in its time. The forces will push you to grow and be perfect. But this is our free will. So I've learned, and I'm learning more and more, if I just reduce the talking, reduce getting involved in people's business, literally close your eyes as much as you can, watch how much your life improves. Watch how the spiritual IRS is not looking through your files. Watch how even the policeman gives you grace. Sometimes a person gets pulled over. Wouldn't it be nice if the police officer said, listen, I understand why you were speeding. I feel like you've learned your lesson. There's no need to give you a ticket. You feel very grateful for that. But when it comes to other people, we want reward and punishment immediately. Justice must be served. I always ask someone who's basically saying, well, if justice is not served, what kind of society are we going to live in? I say, no problem. I just want to know, I have a question for you. If your son was the one being accused, if your son went through this, and there was an opportunity to help him grow without embarrassing him, humiliating him, or canceling him, would you like that? No, just burn him at the cross. It's fine. He should learn it.
He deserves it.
He deserves it. No parent's going to say that. Every parent wants their child to grow and learn and be held accountable mercifully. Not in an embarrassing way, not in a way that takes away their livelihood, not in a way that ruins their societal position. So if you ever wonder, if you want to know what is the right way of approaching something, just reframe it with your child. How would you want your child to be treated? Maybe not totally scot-free, but at least not in the way that you're trying to execute punishment or judgment on somebody else.
I think it gets complicated because we also, piggybacking on what you said, one of the first things we teach in classes like Kabbalah 1 is the law of cause and effect, right? For every, maybe in physics we say for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction. But because our universe is watching everything, so every person is going to get exactly what they deserve. Our option or our choice is, are we an executioner or are we a witness? And that's something I work with my kids on constantly, and I feel like it's a good message for those of us who are no longer kids as well. Let's say, for example, one hits the other, or I say hit, I don't mean really hurt them, but smacks them, give that back to me. So, in that moment, child B has the option to hit back, or child B has the option to grab something that belongs to the original thief. And I always tell them that, first of all, the person who wins is the person who stops it. Not the last person to hit, right? Because it can go back and forth. People who are listening can't see my hands, but it's like it becomes a smacking fight until somebody either cries or gives up. The person who wins is the person who stops hitting. Number two is, and I tell them this at least once a week, if not more often, the universe knows harder to hit than you ever will. The universe knows exactly how to hit the other. If they deserve to get hit, you do not want to be the bat with which they get hit. And what that teaches, I think, it may be comical for those of you who are listening to think in those terms, but if you realize it, what David just said before is that if you hit, someone else has to hit you back somewhere on down the line. It's not going to be your little brother or your little sister. It may be the IRS. It may be your boss. It may be your neighbor. It may be somebody on the highway, God forbid. But everything that we do comes back at us. So what's really our choice is not, can I escape the system? Can I get pulled over by the cop who's going to be totally understanding? The free will is really to put out more good than bad, so that what's coming back to me is more good than bad. It's more gifts than smacks. And so training ourselves to think in terms of, it happened to me a few weeks ago in a Kabbalah 1 class where we were talking about using words, similar to what David was saying. And someone asked if it's better, and I want to hear what you have to say about this also, David, that instead of taking it out on people at work or in the moment, I went home and got onto social media and vented there, which really is one of the most negative and pervasive diseases that's happening right now in society. Is the anonymity of social media allows people to feel like their words are inconsequential. I can say whatever I want to say, and I don't have to face you at work in the morning because you don't work at my office, or you're not in my family. So I can behave how I want to behave online without repercussions in my life. And friends, nothing could be further from the truth. So David, when it comes, I can say personally, and this comes up in classes all the time, I get how speaking is bad. But what about that 10 times removed feeling we have when we're online, or we're sending an email, or we're texting, or we're posting on social media? Do our words count just as much there? Or is there, I sense that there's something more powerful in speech itself, but there's got to be consequences in what you write as well.
There 100% is, and I think just because maybe some of us don't have as big of an audience and we can't see it, but it can be one or two people whose lives you change or affect in a certain way that has immense repercussions. We talk about, without getting into specifics, for example, one of the most famous people in the world who came to study Kabbalah and opened the doors to millions and millions of people came as a result of a friend who many people didn't even know, who was treated respectfully and well by someone just for no reason at all. And that friend then ends up bringing the most famous person in the world and changing the lives of tens and hundreds of millions of people for decades to come. So you could affect a person's life in a positive or negative way, and that can have massive repercussions. Sometimes people have so many opinions about couples and who should be together and who shouldn't be together. And I've seen that. Something that one of our colleagues told me 15 years ago when I had an opinion about these two people dating. And he said, you got to be very careful. Because what if these two people, regardless of what you see or don't see, are meant to get together, and the child they have becomes like the Messiah, or someone who literally just changes the planet. And maybe because of you interfered, causing this couple not together. And I said, well, how am I supposed to know that? How do I ever render an opinion? And he said, well, the point is, you need to feel like every opinion you give could cause or deter something that great. And just have the weight of that behind every opinion you make. And 9 out of 10 opinions you just won't make as a result. And that one you do make will be incredibly thoughtful and filled with energy. And also we should be praying. People just throw opinions and words out there like it's nothing. What's the big deal? But the thing is, that's actually what's shaping the world. And it's shaping our own personal lives. So forget about shaping the world. It's shaping your personal life. And even if you can't see it energetically, it is. If you actually put tape on your mouth for a month, you'd be wealthy. Put tape on your mouth for a month, you'd probably find your soulmate faster. Put tape on your mouth for a month and you'd have peace of mind, sleep better. Everything. In fact, people actually put tape on their mouth when they're sleeping to sleep better. I actually think you should put tape on your mouth during the day, you'll sleep better. So, because by reducing just that waste, the waste of words that go out there, and holding more weight behind the words that we do say, changes the game. That's how you become a channel. Whenever you're flippant about stuff, and it becomes anything that becomes too casual, most likely is going to the negative side. That doesn't mean we need to be uptight and tense about everything, but when it comes to something as important as sharing our energy via our words, we should be conscious of that. Probably the highest level of consciousness should go behind the words.
I think what's interesting, what you said before about be'ito nachishena, the idea of mercy or judgment, is that one of the things that the Kabbalists teach about the time that we're living in is that the process is going to be accelerated.
Yeah.
And we used to teach that idea in classes, and it was very theoretical for me until these last few years where, and maybe for those of you who are listening, you might not have noticed it or seen it through this lens before, but for me, I've seen so clearly how certain qualities or behaviors are no longer tolerated, right? It's such a fascinating thing, right? We used to know that there were these pervasive, negative, toxic behaviors and attitudes and even cultures in the workplace that no longer are tolerated, and now you can be quote unquote canceled for. This is something that the Kabbalists have been talking about for quite a while, the idea that as we get closer to radical transformation of humanity, negativity will not be able to be swept under the rug, that things will have to come out in order to be cleansed. And so you see this happening. I think it sounds terrible to say it's been exciting to watch, but the fact that the Kabbalists predicted this surfacing of garbage from people's history, from the history of institutions, and you see that these institutions are literally crumbling because they were rooted in prejudice, rooted in abuse, rooted in disalignment with what their quote unquote values were. So you can very well look at those the Me Too movement and all the terrible things that are happening in the world as terrible, or even, my kids have said, wow, it's really a scary place to live these days. But the truth is, people always believed these things. People always felt this way. People always treated one another this way. The fact that it's emerged from onto the surface of the way people live their lives or lead their businesses or their organizations is a fact, is proof that the work that we're doing is working. And again, I know it can sound strange for some of you who are maybe listening. It's your first episode, but the idea that the Kabbalists teach is that the more light you reveal, the more darkness you can see. And not that the darkness wasn't there already. It's not that it creates darkness. It's that it makes the darkness more visible in the same way that, when the sun shines in your living room or your kitchen at a certain point in the afternoon and you can see all the dust particles in the air and all the smudges on the window, the dust particles are always there and the smudges were there to begin with. But when the light is concentrated, the rays of light are concentrated in that way, you can see what needs to be worked on. So for those of you that have this feeling that, oh, I'm being exposed, or oh, I'm being humiliated, or if it's happened to you that you feel you're unjustly accused of something or involved in something that has nothing to do with you, this is the opportunity to really purge and cleanse. And it's almost like there's this collective purge that's happening, and you can blame certain politicians if you'd like. You can say, oh, it's there. It was going to happen anyway. And that's one of the things that I think is important to remember also, apropos politicians, is that, we say, oh, how can these people rise to power? How can such, terrible, how can there be so much negativity so high up? The Kabbalists teach as well about that whoever is in a position in the government is a result of the consciousness of the people. We may have voting and we may have campaigns and whatnot, but the people in power are always a reflection of the ruling minister in the upper worlds. It's not about enough people voted or enough people didn't vote. Whoever is in charge is a reflection of the consciousness of the collective. So we can say, oh, it's negative, it's toxic, and point fingers. A cliche of cliches, when you point a finger, you have three to four fingers pointing back at yourself. So if you're caught in a blame storm like that, ask yourself, is there even a fragment of what's going on that I can take responsibility for? How am I critical, prejudiced, judgmental, blaming? See, the more accountability we can take, the less negativity there will be.
And just to close on one thing, we'll close on this, comment on one thing you said, because a lot of people will ask questions. What do you mean if a maniacal leader is the one leading our country?
Or anyone else's country for that matter.
Or anyone. How is this a reflection of me? And just to be clear, it's not that it's necessarily a reflection of you.
As an individual.
No,
for sure not.
It's or even collective individuals, it's a reflection of what was needed to move the consciousness of this collective forward.
Right.
Because it says that if you do not put that positive pressure on yourself to achieve greatness, the Creator is forced to put someone who is a ruler over you that pushes you in not such a nice way towards your perfection. And that is by causing pain and suffering. So the reflection is less about, hey, if they're maniacal, so are you. The reflection is of more of your process and how slow or quickly you are to achieving your perfection. That ruler happens to be the perfect ruler for your country to move it forward.
And what would you say to somebody who feels they're the ones being canceled?
If you're on the receiving end of that, it's not enough just to send this podcast to everyone saying, stop it. It's to realize if this is happening to me, it's happening for me. And I would brace for impact. I would accept it with joy. I would say, what a pleasure at every moment. I would send love to all the people perpetuating it. It will cleanse you. It will hurt. It will be painful. You will hit a bottom, and then you will rise. And you will be on a higher level than you ever were before. But just don't create more of a mess as you're going through it. Don't fall into sadness. Don't rise to arrogance. Just stay right in the middle. Learn as much as possible. Allow the pain to cleanse, and then you'll be free.
Do you think that that happens to someone so that they'll pivot, that to tell them that they're not in the right place or they're not with the right people? Or you think
canceling doesn't always happen to people who did something wrong? Spiritually, canceling can happen to someone who did nothing wrong, but must be elevated to a very high level in some field. Business, spiritual, consciousness, soulmate, something. So I don't want people who are going through a tough time to think they did something wrong. We all make mistakes. We all have our human moments. A lot of it's already been scripted anyways. There's no point in just trying to get heavy on yourself.
No, but I mean, like, let's say, for example, we've known there's a few people in, let's say, Hollywood that have been canceled. Does it mean they should stop acting or directing or producing? They should now go into the restaurant world? I mean, that's what I'm saying. Does it mean
that is between them and their creator to pray and to ask, hey, I want to do what my soul's meant to do. If that's acting, I'm going to double down. I've seen many actors come back from that and actually become more successful. If it's pivoting and becoming an investor, if it's becoming whatever. I think the point is when you're at your highest consciousness and you talk to the creator and you truly pray for it, you will be guided and you should listen to that guidance.
It's not always easy, but it's definitely cheaper and simpler than getting 100 advisors or asking everybody you know what do they think. I think that one of the messages from the last few episodes has really been whatever challenge comes toward you, it's really to help you be more internal and less external. And it's very easy to go external when something is wrong, to speak about it, to write about it, to complain about it. Any challenge that comes to you is there to help you be more internal and to use that as your compass. We want to make sure that everybody knows as well that this coming weekend is a really powerful cosmic window called Purim. And it's really connected to this idea of rising above and triumphing over doubts, fears, negativity, opponents and oppressors from within. It's very easy to look at people who are against you as an external force, but there is something very internal happening as well. And this weekend, Saturday night and Sunday, is our yearly infusion of energy to rise above with happiness. Like David was saying, if it's happening to you, be joyful, be grateful, learn what you can, and the support to do that comes at us literally this weekend. If you'd like to join us to stream, we'll provide the links so that you can be with us wherever you are, physically or online, and just to make sure that you're connected to that idea that the doubts that come to me are an illusion. The challenges that come to me are not there to bury me. They're there for me to rise above. And the more of us that are of that mindset, the more we can truly rise above, not only personally, but also in the collective ways that we're being challenged to be the better person, rise above, and not let darkness weigh us down. So please visit weeklyenergyboost.com to catch those links. You can also visit weeklyenergyboost.com to learn more about the things we think are important, to donate to support our podcast, as well as to dig into our archives. We encourage you to follow us on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and everywhere you get your podcasts. And as always, you can share this episode and help others achieve that mindset so that the entire planet is elevated because of you. Have a fabulous week, everyone, and we'll see you next time on the Weekly Energy Boost.